Welcome, everyone. We're just giving it a minute for people to join our webinar. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Fitz, and I'm the Executive Director of the Adirondack Research Consortium. I'm pleased to welcome you to our final program in this fall's webinar series, Impacts, Threats, and Opportunities. Before we begin our program, I have two quick announcements. One is Volume 25 of the Adirondack Journal of Environmental Studies is going to be imminently released. You can find that on the Digital Works Union webpage, or go to the adkresearch.org and you can find a link to the online version of Volume 25. And we're also inviting submissions for Volume 26, and you can find the link to submit your interest in that also on our webpage. The other announcement I have is next Thursday, we are hosting the 2022 Fall Forestry Roundtable at SUNY Adirondack. Registration and program information can be found on our website. Now on to the program. I want to thank Paul Smith College for partnering with us to bring these webinars to you. I want to recognize and thank Adirondack Health for sponsoring today's program. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. If you want to talk to each other, please use the chat function. We welcome your questions. Please put them in the, we will get to as many of those as we possibly can. Those that we're not able to, we will post on our Facebook. These programs are recorded, and you can find copies of these recordings on our YouTube website. Today's program focuses on the history and evolution of agriculture in the Adirondacks. The inspiration and organization of this program was done by fellow board member and SUNY Plattsburgh professor Eileen Allen, who will introduce and moderate the panel. Eileen.
Thank you very much, Dan. So our panel today, we have three remarkable speakers. Our first speaker will be Anita Deming to talk about the history of agriculture. And she was the agricultural program leader at Essex County Cooperative Extension for over 35 years. She's currently with the president of the Boquet River Association. And she has a strength in environmental economics. And indeed, she co-authored this book, From Forest to Fields. And we'll get information to you about how to get a hold of this free book. In addition to her work with Cooperative Extension, she's worked on funding for direct marketing innovation in Essex County and is one of the co-founders of the Adirondack Harvest Program. Our second speaker will be Adam Dewbury, who is an economic and environmental anthropologist with the Adirondack North Country Association, where he is the local food systems program coordinator. And he's held that position since 2020. He's worked in small-scale local food manufacturing as well as the restaurant industry for many, many years. Unfortunately, we won't be seeing Adam today because he has a technical problem with the camera, but we will have a graphic that he has contributed. And thank goodness it's a map. So our last speaker will be Courtney Grimes-Sutton from Mace Chasm Farm in Keysville, New York. And Courtney is a professional butcher. She's their farm grazed livestock, including cows and sheep, pigs and poultry. And the farm also produces cuts, broths, grinds. They produce sausages, smoked meats, and other items. And they do this through a farm store as well as through the farmers markets. We will continue to our program now. I do want to remind you that the chat is not moderated, although you can speak to one another in the chat. So if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer section. We'll get to as many as we can. Thanks. Anita, are you ready to talk to us?
Born ready.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, I worked for Cornell Cooperative Extension for many, many years. I started as the agriculture agent, and then I added community resources, and then I added just about every, I was every agent at one point in time. So I've got a broad knowledge of adult education. So at one point in time, I got a grant from New York State Agriculture and Markets to create the history of agriculture in the Champlain Valley. And so I worked together with Andrew, and we pulled together that book, and it is available free. I gave any of you that live or get to Plattsburgh, I gave Eileen a box of them, so you can go pick one up for free, or you can ask me or her to mail one to you, but I'll guarantee you it'll get a whole lot easier if you ask Eileen, because I'm very, very inefficient at going to the post office. Sorry. Okay, history of agriculture. So the first thing you need to know about agriculture is you've got to have soil, climate, and moisture and they sort of are the parameters around which you determine what crops you can grow. I mean, we don't grow bananas here. There's a reason. And yet we still can grow things that they can't grow in Florida. So let's just talk about our soil. Number one is based upon the Champlain Sea that was one time in the Champlain Valley. The most recent was about 10,000 years ago after the glaciers primarily melted. And the soils that were eroded from the glaciers sorted in the Champlain Sea. So the clays are in the middle and basically under the Lake Champlain, and so the sand is right next to the bank because the clays settle out and are on the bottom at one point in time, and then the sand is sorted from the wave action of the lake. And so we don't have a lot of silt in our area. The climate, basically, at least Essex County, it's called the desert of New York because we have the lowest rainfall of almost anyone, because we have something called the mountains to our west that push the rain off of the Great Lakes north and south of us. So Essex County is fairly dry, and if you're interested in growing something here, you usually need irrigation to reduce your risk of crop loss. So the climate, that primarily depends on the latitude and the altitude of where you are. So, it can be 20 degrees difference or more between Westport and Lake Placid. So you know about those sorts of things, I'm sure, if you live in this area. So let's see, first crop growers, this is the history now, right? Finally get to that. Were primarily Native Americans, the Iroquois and Mohawk, and I can't say the name of the group, Haddon something or other, so sorry about that, it's in the book. Their primary diet was from hunting and fishing, and they tended to come into the Adirondacks more in the summertime. They lived usually a little further south or a little further north near the St. Lawrence Seaway, which provided moderation in climate as well. But they did at times do a little bit of agriculture, which was called the Three Sisters. So that was corn, squash, and beans or legumes. So the corn provided the stem or the stalk to get up out of the weeds and into the sunshine. Um, the beans provided nitrogen. Beans are a legume and they can fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. And the squash spread out underneath and shaded out the weeds. So those are the three sisters, and that was primarily, and for the most part, the Native Americans would plant their three sisters up over a bank and then down a little side so that other Native Americans couldn't find where they'd hidden their crops. But they looked for a place where it couldn't be seen from the lake, but there was an opening where they could plant something. And they would use primarily fire to control what was the trees that were there and create an open space for their crop. So the second crop growers in the valley were the soldiers. And, soldiers, what do they say? The army marches on its stomach, right? So, but at that time, there wasn't a lot of commerce, north, south, east, west, anyway. So they had to basically grow everything they were going to eat, and they had to spend a lot of time on firewood and food because, if they were going to survive, that's what they needed to do. So they grew primarily crops that, in the summer, obviously they grew everything and they loved it, but that didn't last very long. So then they also grew a lot of crops that were stored well, such as wheat, cabbage, onions, carrots, potatoes, things that, you could keep a little while longer, squash, winter squash. And then the third crop growers were the European settlers that moved into the area to help the soldiers, so the soldiers could spend more time marching around and doing whatever soldiers do. And that began much more expanded and varieties of crops being grown in the area, fresh vegetables, obviously, and a little bit more structured agriculture. Wheat became a major product at that time, and also sheep were very important because we didn't really have cotton up here, and we didn't have much, so wool was huge, and there was a big mill in Malone that was the place where the wool was spun and made into clothing. So that was a big deal for a long time. And of course, you could certainly spin your own wool and things like that. But if you didn't have sheep, then you were doing linen, and that was flax. And flax really, it grows up here, but it's nowhere near as voluminous, and it takes a long time to spin, and you got to beat the chaff off. It's a very difficult product to create clothing out of. And in fact, often the curtains in a house were like one of the most valuable things in settlers' home. Let's see. So as time went on, around after the War of 1812, we started to see more English in the area. Before that, it was primarily French. And so for many years, like 1609, Samuel Champlain came into the lake area, and it was the War of 18. So we were basically French in this region for a long time until the English won the War of 1812. Let's see. I know one of the big things that happened in this region was that potash is a part of making gunpowder, and so burning down trees became a really big industry for a while, because you could get some potash out from those trees, some lime or whatever, and that was a big piece of 1860s and the Civil War and things like that. So potash was worth 35 cents a bushel and wheat was worth 5 cents a bushel. So at one point in time, this whole area was cleared. There were very, very few trees in this region. For the most part, our trees, 100, 150 years old is about the oldest any tree gets to be. So, we're back to a lot of similar, what this area looked like when it was first visited by Europeans. Let's see. So I talked about wool. I talked about, and then finally in the 1800s, also we saw a lot of breeding going on, animals coming over from Europe, Holsteins and Merino sheep, and a wide variety of special livestock, and also crops too. Corn, when it first started out, it was like 6 kernels on a little tiny stalk and about that tall, and it got bred by the Native Americans from Mexico. It basically came out of that area, and so there was a lot of plant breeding going on over the years, where the crops became very different from what they started out as. Let's see. And then when the Champlain Canal came in, the locks were built down from Lake Champlain through to the Hudson River. And that was a big, big deal. Actually, you've heard of Stewart's Follies, I'm sure. The second steamship paddle boat, his folly number 2 was actually the Champlain ferry. Well, anyway, it was on Lake Champlain, and it ferried people up and down the lake as well. I guess what I would say is, over the years, instead of one farmer growing everything that was needed for survival, we started growing crops that were more suited to the area. So we moved away from things like tobacco and things like that to things like butter. So we had the butter was something that could be shipped down to New York City and up to Montreal, and so that was a really big product for us as we started to specialize. Maple syrup was a huge product. Everybody loved it. Something different than honey, which was the basic. And then eventually the sugar cane that came out of the Caribbean area. Apples. We specialized in apples, Macintosh apples, big with sausage, different kinds of sausage, merino sheep, Morgan horses. I'm going to end on Morgan horses because horses are my favorite. And thank you, Eileen, for telling me to hurry up. And so that's the basics. I guess at the end, I'm going to say that there are really, just like almost in every business, there's 2 philosophies. You can be the low-cost producer in a specialized product. For a long time, what we had was the dairy industry in this area. Dairy ruled. The dairy still rules a lot in Clinton and Franklin County, not so much in Essex. Or you can be vertically integrated and capture the values of not only production, but processing and marketing. That's kind of Courtney's thing, and I'll let her talk about that. So there you go. I'm done. Is that okay? Is that what you wanted, Eileen?
That's great. Thank you, Anita. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What we'd like to do now is have Adam Dewbury talk to us, and he'll give a more statistics-based look at agriculture in the Adirondacks at this time. Adam, you all ready to go?
I am, Eileen. Thank you. And not totally statistics based, but I do have some numbers to share with everyone. And I've kind of loosely organized this around the overarching theme of this webinar series of impacts, threats, and opportunities. And so as far as impact goes, the first thing I would like to say is that agriculture is really a major sector of New York's economy. My colleague Matt Keene from Saratoga Cooperative Extension has been doing some really great work taking data from the USDA Ag Census and putting it into a usable format, a more user-friendly format than you get from USDA, and also relating it to the Farm to School 30% initiative. And I'm going to be referencing some regions of the state, and that's how those regions are defined, is that's what the 30% initiative did. So looking at the state as a whole, in 2017, there were over $5 billion in gross sales of agricultural products from New York. And one thing that I found really interesting with this data that Matt collated was that the North Country region, which is 7 northern counties, Clinton, Essex, Franklin, Hamilton, Jefferson, Lewis, and St. Lawrence. Those 7 counties have the 3rd highest gross sales in the state, almost $800 million, behind the Finger Lakes region and the Central New York Mohawk Valley regions. And the North Country region actually leads the state in gross sales of total fruits and vegetables, over $464 million. So agriculture generates a tremendous amount of business activity, not only throughout the state, but in the North Country. And thank you for pulling this map up, Eileen, because this is what I'm going to turn to next. Yesterday, I was fortunate to have a talk with Adirondack scholar Amy Godine. And one thing I said to Amy was that if I had to characterize agriculture in the Adirondacks, it would be that it's uneven. And I think unevenness is a good way to think about the Adirondacks as a whole. It's very difficult to generalize across the entire region because it really is quite diverse. So this map is something we've been working on at ANCA. This was produced by Eric Barber, who's a student at Colgate University, and he was an intern in the local food system program last summer. One thing I need to say about this, it's a work in progress. It's very incomplete. This certainly is not showing every farm in the region, but even with what little we've got here, we can see some interesting patterns, and it's color coded. So the little green circles are produce farms. The orange ones are livestock farms, folks who raise animals for meat. The yellow are small dairy and egg producers. And the purple circles are big dairies. And Eric put the cutoff point there as dairies that are doing more than $500,000 in sales a year. And to speak to Anita's point, you really see in the northern part of this area, there are a lot of these big dairies, and that's certainly big business in Jefferson County, in Lewis County, northern Franklin County, and St. Lawrence. But if we kind of pull our attention to Essex County, which is going to be over on the eastern side of the map, and I don't know how well you can see it, but if you look at Elizabethtown, that's a good sort of central point. Essex County, I think, is really kind of unique in terms of its agriculture scene. You can really see there's a real concentration of produce farms there. And there are also some attributes of Essex County agriculture that really kind of set it apart from other regions of the state. And I pulled some of these out of the Farmland Protection and Food System Plan that was recently produced by Essex County Cornell Cooperative Extension. I really urge everybody to go to Essex CCE's website and take a look at this plan. It's fantastic. It should be a model for these farmland protection plans all over the state. There's grant money out there for this. And to speak to the unevenness of this, some counties in New York State don't have an updated farmland protection and food system plan. But this one is really pretty amazing. And it's presented in a way that is very readable and very interesting. It's not just dry technical stuff. But if we're looking at Essex County and talking about what's going on there, excuse me, Essex has some of the highest percentages of young, new and beginning, and female farmers of any county in New York. There are 285 farms in Essex County, 506 farmers, 162 female principal producers, 311 farm workers. And these numbers might sound small if you're not thinking about it relatively. The entire year-round population of the Adirondack Park is only 130,000 people. I'm not sure what the population of Essex County is, but to me, these numbers are pretty compelling, that you've got 506 farmers in a fairly small county in New York State. There are over 57,000 acres of land in agriculture in Essex County, and the county did 14 million in total sales. When we talk about ag sales, this is really what I think is the most unique thing about Essex County, is it's got the second highest rate of direct-to-consumer sales in New York State. Direct-to-consumer means that there isn't any sort of mediator between the farmer and the customer. So these are things like CSAs, farmers markets, that sort of thing. And if we think about opportunities, I think there's a huge opportunity to continue growing this direct-to-consumer market. Thank you, Anita. So there are 32,000 people in Essex County. Just to give you a little bit of context for the number of farmers and farm workers that are here. When the pandemic hit, a lot of the Essex County farmers I work with reported that they had some of the best years ever as people flocked to get local food. So it's pretty clear here that there's a big opportunity to build this direct-to-consumer marketing that Essex County has. And now I'm going to kind of be the wet blanket and talk about the threats and the challenges. And I think Courtney is going to be able to speak to some of these when she talks. So at ANCA, we've identified, and this is backed up by the Farmland Protection Plan, that access to capital is a tremendous barrier to farmers in our region. Farming is a very capital-intensive business. It requires large capital inputs at certain times of the year. It's very, very risky because you're, dealing with the vagaries of nature. So things like crop failures, floods have impacted farmers. And because of all this, sometimes it can be difficult for farmers to access financing through conventional means like banks. There are options for farmers to get money from government programs like the Farm Service Agency. They have a whole bunch of loan programs, but those don't serve everybody. One thing we have done at ANCA is made helping farmers gain access to capital a big part of our work in the local food system program. And we do that a couple of different ways. We recently launched a 0% interest flexible term loan fund for farmers that uses criteria that are less strict than conventional lenders to get money into the hands of small producers that they can then put to work. We also do stuff like help farmers apply for grants. And we recently had some big success with that, with a farmer that I work with who has a farm in St. Lawrence County and a business in Tupper Lake doing aggregation and distribution. And we also help provide farmers with technical assistance. So things like business planning, helping farmers to create business plans. One of the things that came out in the Farmland Protection Plan, that in the 62 Essex County farmers that they surveyed, 48% of those folks didn't have a business plan. And that's also going to impact getting access to capital, because that's something that banks want to see. And we don't do business plans at ANCA, but we can connect folks with our very big network of partners who do that kind of work. And we can also help connect folks with other kinds of technical assistance like digital marketing, marketing in general, bookkeeping help, that sort of thing. So I'm going to close out by saying we need in this region more, I think, state involvement with regards to funding. The whole farming agriculture ecosystem in this region is severely underfunded. And I think we really need to see some significant state investment in it, because we have a tremendous opportunity here to grow the food we need to feed people in New York State. Juniper Hill is one of the farms I work with. They're one of the larger organic vegetable farms. They've got a great slogan: don't let California feed New York. And I think that's fantastic, but in order for that to happen, we really need to see a lot more state and federal support that is presented in ways that works for farmers, that is not onerous for farmers to access, and also to support other organizations that help farmers, like the cooperative extensions, like organizations like ANCA or the Adirondack Land Trust, you know, all of these other kind of players in the region that can help bolster our local farming and food scene. And my voice is given out, Eileen, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there.
Adam, thank you so much. This is just, I think, what we're looking for. So Anita has given us some of the history, and Adam has set a context for us. And now I'd like to go to Courtney, who is one of the young female farmers that Adam was referring to. I think it's pretty neat. Courtney is a professional butcher, and it's been pretty neat to get to talk with her a little bit in preparing for this. So Courtney, do you feel all set to go here?
I do.
Okay.
That's great. Those numbers are so interesting. I'm one of 162 principal female producers in the county. And I'm also, I'm going to do a quick intro just on our business and operation so that you know where I'm coming from. And then I'm going to focus on our challenges and some ideas that might help at the end. But I'll say that of the 506 farmers in Essex County, every single one of us would offer a different set of ideas and challenges. So these are the ones that I'm aware of from my sort of inner close circle of farm community and from our operation. I'm going to share this little slideshow and just kind of run through. Are you all seeing that? Screen share yet?
I can see it, Courtney.
Great.
It looks good.
Okay, awesome. So these are a few slides I pulled from a presentation I gave for the Northeast Organic Farming Association. And it's just an intro, because the first thing I wanted to share briefly is about my lived experience as a small farmer in Essex County. My operation is livestock. That's not like, yeah, when we began our farm, we felt like that we sort of heard from our farm community here that was a place in the local foodscape where there was sort of space for another operation doing these products at our local markets. So we focused there. I did already have some skill sets in that department. But so, yeah, we run a small butcher shop where we do our own added value processing, which is state inspected, where we process the livestock that we raise on our farm. We don't process for other producers. Then we direct market our product. But here's roughly, I'm just gonna running through our week. This is a photo of our shop and our 2020 chicken harvest team. We process our chickens right on the farm. Here's a picture of our shop. We operate under a USDA 5A poultry permit and a 20C Ag and Markets processing permit. You know, the quality of the food starts in the fields. That was something I wanted to point out. But Tuesday mornings, we have a full rail. The butcher shop crew of about 3 people comes in to the shop to begin breakdown of the full carcasses that we've prepared for the week. Begins Tuesday morning. We're often still processing breakdown on Tuesday and Wednesday. These are all photos of the incredible meat cutters that I work with. The finished cuts get packed on Tuesday. By Wednesday, we're starting to switch into finish work. So we're rubbing the bacons, the hands, hocks, the finish, you know, we're cutting the pork chop, and we're pretty much doing finish work. And then Thursday and Friday, it's all finish work. We're making sausages. We're cutting herbs from the farm's garden to season the sausages, grinding, packaging, slicing, smoking, jarring broths. Like by Saturday morning, it really has to be done because we're at our 2 big farmers markets in the region, Saturday in Saranac Lake and Sunday at Keene Valley. Those are the 2 biggest, most successful markets in the region where we are. Those were the 2 markets that were sort of founded by previous generation of small farmers. But they're also in more affluent parts of the county. So I think that their longtime establishment is helpful. It takes time to build a culture around an event. They're also just in beautiful places, in places where tourists come through, and near enough to some different population centers. The picture on the right is at the Hotel Saranac in the winter. So we have about 4 months of good farmers market season: June, July, August, September, and then October, the plug is pulled, the weather is cold, we can't be outside anymore, produce could start freezing, and people just don't want to be outside to do their grocery shopping. It's no longer the fun social experience that it is in the summer. So that photo on the right is a photo from one of our market adaptations, which is a bunch of producers getting together to offer pre-orders and pickups, curbside pickups. And then there's also an indoor market at the Hotel Saranac. I would say that winter farmers markets for direct marketing is a very underdeveloped thing in our region. There are like, you know, some producers in the region that just have been chipping away at it. So there are some fledgling winter market opportunities, but they're pretty weak. For us, Monday, we come back from farmers market, we recollect ourselves, we load the livestock that we're going to haul to our USDA slaughterhouse, and we will then, in that same trip, we'll go with a trailer full of livestock. We'll come home with the truck bed cooler full of the carcasses that we had dropped off the week before. The rail will get loaded, and then we're back to Tuesday again, and we begin our processing week again. So that's the week at Mace Chasm Farm. We're nose to tail butchers, so therefore we are forced to make a fairly diverse array of products. We make dry cured meats like salami, a lot of different smoked meats. We're able to cut special roasts for the holidays and, adapt seasonally in what we're offering. We make great sausages. We've had to adapt products, for us, the dry cured meats helped address some of that slow season problem of not really being able to market as quickly and effectively as the later in the season. We make bone broths to address the huge amount of bones that we have, but we nose to tail butchers have to be creative. That means that we have a really wide array of products that we offer. I'm not going to really dive into why we decided to go with this model, because I think that mostly what we want to talk about is just the bigger picture. But I will say that I was introduced as a butcher, and that's not untrue. I'm a butcher. I didn't ever intend to become a butcher. I'm a butcher 4 days a week. And that has actually the ratio. When we started, I was doing a lot less added value work. As our operation grew, I've headed up the added value department, and it has taken over more of my career than I'd like, frankly. I am more of an agrarian. I've been a farmer for my entire adult life, with little pockets of some other skill building and work, but mostly that's been my goal. So sometimes I struggle with wondering whether I need to dial back the added value work to be doing what I want to be doing more of. But I will say that I think that part of the success of our operation in particular is the variety and quality of the products we're able to bring because we process them. So that's why I have this slide that's like, did I create a monster? This is just some inner thoughts of Courtney while I'm at the butcher block working. And then there are wonderful things about the job also. You know, I survey the job market and there's not a lot on it for me. So I'm also pretty happy. This slide that I'm sharing right now, it's called Numbers Are Always Part of the Answer. It basically just shows that doing our own added value processing is actually not less expensive than having, if I had decided to work with the packing house. I think that's just worth sharing. I mean, part of the, you know, as I said, I think the big advantage is that we have this really amazing variety of products. I don't deal with the painful seeming bottleneck of whether or not you can get dates at a processing house, a slaughterhouse. There are a lot of farmers that really struggle with that, who are driving further and further, who are bending their whole production and harvest schedule around availability at the slaughterhouses. We don't really have to do that. And that's huge. I'm also creating some jobs. For the most part, those jobs, you know, the jobs are valuable if, you know, and the people, they're full. So we've created some jobs, including one for myself on the farm. And I, you know, the numbers are better if we can harvest a retail value at the farm rather than a commodity value. But direct marketing up here is really hard. It's really hard. And it's extremely seasonal because of our cold climate. So that's a nut to crack that we have not successfully cracked yet. I think the hardest thing about doing what we do is that we wear too many hats. This is a slide just showing me some shots of me from our farm doing all the different things: administrative work, ag production, the meat processing, and the marketing. I would gladly take off some of these hats. I mean, I would gladly take off 3 of them, to be honest. I don't particularly want to do admin, processing, or marketing, but you know, you can't always get what you want. But I think it's worth thinking about, you know, as we envision what could potentially be a stronger local and regional and even national food system. But this is a slide I had in my original presentation because when I'm problem solving around our food system, I always run into the fact that it just, like these solutions always fall apart. I think that like capitalism and real quality and health are at odds. So I always think that's worth mentioning. It's like at the bottom of the barrel every time I'm exploring solutions. So in our, we had wanted to just touch on my sense of what challenges to small ag and direct marketing in Essex County are. I threw this list together and I will have a couple that I'll add, but I would say the one that I see my peers struggling with the most and that we struggle with the most is the limited regional marketing opportunities. A lot of us can produce a ton of amazing food on the land that we have access to. And our bottleneck is marketing opportunities. Again, it's just so rural here. There are a lot of towns where farmers markets just don't get off the ground. And then even the ones where they do get off the ground and they're amazing, they're pretty seasonal. They're totally seasonal, 4 months of the year. lack of winter markets, and there are not many businesses that present wholesale opportunities, substantial wholesale opportunities for us in the region. So that's one. And again, like the few substantial wholesale opportunities, like there aren't many processing businesses to work with. So that harkens back to the bottleneck I see for a lot of my peers in the livestock sector, where that just meat processing dates are really hard to get. And I think, yeah, and then there's things that we don't have here, like small scale dairy cooperatives that are making some fresh product. We don't have a regional milk on the shelf in the area. Like there are in the Hudson Valley, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a regional, milk bottling co-op there. So small dairy cooperatives, I think, is something that could make sense. There seems to be space for it on the shelf at the stores. Further processing of fruit and veg, you don't see a lot of like processing facilities here in the region that are making pickles, fermented foods, ciders, other beverages. And it does seem like that would be a good fit. I understand why they're not here. And I think that that's something that we could address that could impact our small ag here positively. It's challenging. Another challenge is that it's difficult to coordinate distribution out of the region. The really like bigger producers in the small ag scene, like some of the produce growers, are doing their own trucking. So out of the region, but if you're not able to fill a truck and you're interested in opening accounts and those accounts start small, that's really hard to figure out. It's expensive. And there's the business of the Hub on the Hill that's been trying to work out offering affordable distribution. And that is just, we haven't figured that out in this area. I think access to consultation about ways that we might pivot our agricultural practices or crops that we might bring in that might be more resilient or could be a good fit in the area, or for us on our particular farms, finding information about and agronomics about those potential ideas. It's hard to find, it's time intensive, and we don't, and then what are we doing? We're sitting there kind of searching on the internet and calling, some ag consultants maybe at Cornell, but it feels hard to access information that might help us pivot and improve our operations, find things that are potentially more lucrative and might be a better fit for our climate. Housing is a challenge for us. We all anybody employing people, but it's a challenge for everybody in every sector in the North Country, but I thought it was worth mentioning because it can be really challenging, especially for people with seasonal, offering seasonal work, even if you're offering year-round work, but offering seasonal work, housing is always a major hiccup in trying to sort that out. And then the last challenge I noted on this page is just that we're, again, so far away from major population centers that we don't have, why would aggregators and processors establish themselves here? And, businesses that would create significant wholesale accounts for producers in our area. That's a challenge. A couple that I didn't note here that I jotted down earlier before the presentation but Adam ended up touching on both of them. An obvious one is just, well, it's like the weather, but it's changing patterns in the weather. And so this again touches back on access to consultation about other crops, pivots we might want to make in our agricultural practices. We're having increased dry spells and increase in flood events, and how we can prepare ourselves for these changing weather patterns and how we can make adaptations on the farm. That's challenging, finding that information. There's a lag time in the collection of data, the sharing of research, and aid in response to that in the meantime, we're all sort of just, it's messy. and making those pivots, establishing whatever it is, establishing tree crops on your pastures for livestock, or deciding to grow different perennial fruit crops. Those pivots take so much time. So there are some changes that are just time intensive for us in the ag sector to make. And so, and it's even slower when we're not finding the information readily. The other last one, again, that Adam touched on, so I'm not going to really linger on it, is the access to capital and financing. Because like the small ag represents, high risk investments. So we're often offered, very short-term loans, which only makes those investments higher risk. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. But again, obviously this line of work is just so heavy on capital investment. And so what you end up having is a lot of farms that are operating in undercapitalized systems. And I think that is yet another thing that really tamps down production. The potential of how much is being produced on these acres of prime ag land in our region. I think that all of these challenges, I think, tamp down production. I'll move on to the page where I brainstormed some potentially helpful things we could do for small scale producers in Essex County. And anyone can interrupt me too if there are questions I should address or comments. So there are programs designed to help us at like NRCS and Soil and Water, and a lot of them are really great, and a lot of them are fairly well funded. I think that another challenge that I didn't mention in the last page that is relevant to this idea is that the small farmers in general, are just really time poor. And I know that we're a hard group to work with. And that said, that if it's possible for administrators of programs that are intended to support us to come out to the farm, there aren't, how many farms did Adam say? Okay, 285 farms. I can't remember if that was just Essex County. I don't know how many administrators there are at these organizations, or but if these were divided up and there was an annual visit to each farm from administrators, where we were being sort of like taking notes and connecting with us and letting us know about programs that could benefit us but we may not know about, that could be really helpful. Because sometimes there are these huge opportunities that we miss completely, and sometimes there are opportunities that we forgot one signature on one page and we miss it. So sometimes it just feels really hard, even when we're trying, even when we know about it, to connect with these programs. But then often I think we don't know about them. A lot of these programs are reimbursement based, and that has, I think, limited our access to these programs and working with them hugely, because we do not, none of us have the cash on hand to make these huge investments and wait for reimbursement. And some of these programs have, since I've been here on the farm for 10 years, some of these programs have started to offer like 50% upfront and then 50% reimbursement. That makes it really hard. It puts us in a hard position with contractors. It's just, and we often just can't do it. I've seen a lot of farms just have to pass up really good opportunities because loan programs for these reimbursement based, funding opportunities would be huge. It would be really helpful to small scale farmers if we were able to incentivize businesses establishing themselves here that do Hey guys, what happened there?
I do not know.
Oh, okay. Should I just reshare my screen to finish up?
Yes, but yeah, let's have just another minute or two, Courtney.
Yep.
So that we can have.
Yeah,
group
this is my
interaction.
last slide.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay. So yep. So I think it would be really helpful if are we able to incentivize businesses coming to the region who are doing that added value production that would create really impactful accounts for the producers in the region. I wondered if inclusion of product from extremely rural parts of the state could be something that New York State could incentivize. Oftentimes we're just all of our, we may have the cabbage needed for this fermenting, we may have a commodity crop that's needed, but we're just further away. We often get excluded from markets that have a 100-mile radius. The logistics of buying from the Adirondacks, it's just harder. I wondered if there could be some sort of state level incentive to include products from the super rural parts of the state. We really need aggregation businesses to work with. And it would be great if there were aggregation businesses working specifically with Adirondack producers. Another one would be really meaningful investment in agritourism. There's been recently the establishment of some cuisine trails, but it hasn't gotten off the ground. It hasn't really started. I like to be an agritourist whenever I travel, so I've observed some things that I think are really helpful. I think investing in that part of our economy could be great. I think a lot of travelers in my generation love this kind of rural tourism. But I think it's a capital investment. It's capital investment that nobody's really talked about, but money for bathrooms, other infrastructure on farms, walking trails, signage, information kiosks, like things that make it a really pleasant experience to pop into these farms, where you might be able to, run into the farm store and get a treat. But if you can learn more about it, I think it becomes agritourism rather than just a kind of more random farm store. I mentioned centering access during the cold months in our most populated downtown areas. So there's not many, but in those areas, could there be an investment in a building? Could there be some investment in creating a couple of year-round farmers markets that include SNAP access that just go year-round? We could use a program that provides expert agricultural savvy financial consultation. That's something that Adam touched on. And then I would say, again, it would be great for us to be able to somehow be more in touch with crop research and some opportunities for existing growers in the region to consider including crops that there are emerging markets for. So again, it's just like, how do we do that? How does that connection happen between growers and pivots and adaptations we could make that might be beneficial to us and give us more lucrative crops, but also meet a demand in the marketplace in the Northeast. So
Courtney,
I'm kind of rushing through this part, but this part was sort of the part I probably should have put this first. But if there are any questions, let me know.
Yeah. Are there questions from the audience? This is fantastic, Courtney. Your suggestions are really very good. And I appreciate you sharing them, because it's hard for the rest of us to know what young farmers are dealing with. Mm-hmm. So are there questions? I have one question here from Toby Harmon, and I think Courtney touched on some of this, but if there's some dialogue here, Jess Grant says that, Courtney, you just laid out a roadmap for administrators / the state for how they can help farmers in the North Country. If you could design a grant or financial aid for farmers, what would it look like? Years, amount, and restrictions. And I'm wondering if that might be something that would be better. I don't think we can answer that in the time that we have. We only have a couple minutes before this ends. But if you would be willing to, maybe we can put that up on the Facebook page as an answer. And the other question is from Toby Harmon, who, and again, you've touched on some of this. And again, I think maybe the answer is a little too long for the time we have left. But Toby says capital is, of course, a large barrier for farmers coming into the business, but there is also often a knowledge barrier for new, younger farmers who may want to join the small ag movement but have little to no experience. Could efficiently overcoming that knowledge barrier encourage more first-generation farmers that may feel intimidated by the challenges of the business? And what's the best way to achieve that? Again, if you have a short bit of guidance, we can do that.
Sure. I mean, I think that's a challenge in any field. You know, you have to, and I would say that you should just identify farms that you admire and go work there. And just, you know, that's a great way to gain a knowledge base. You'll work for like 4 different farmers, and you'll definitely think you can do it better than all of them. And then you go try to do it.
Are there other comments from the audience? Because we'll have to go to Dan Fitz momentarily here.
Eileen, Adam has his hand up. I think he wanted to say something.
Oh, Adam, please.
Yeah, that's a great question, Toby. And this is a big problem. And part of this goes back to just the lack of funding and support for this sort of thing. You know, Jefferson County Community College has an ag business program, and it's under enrolled, and the business part of it has to be part of this discussion. It's, you know, you need to learn the skills of farming, and going to different farms and working on them is a way a lot of people do that, and a great way to do it. But also a huge part of this needs to be some sort of business education built in right at the beginning. And another challenge related to that I just need to bring up quickly is that farmers don't make a lot of money. If you looked at Courtney's slide where she has what the income is without paying herself and what it is with paying herself, it's a pretty small gap, and it's really hard to get folks excited to enter a profession when they learn how little money they're gonna make. And we need to change that too. And again, my answer to this is a lot more state and federal support. New York State puts a lot of money towards stuff in the park, like the $32 million that went to an equestrian center and campground in North Hudson. And I'd like us all to think about what our food system might look like if instead of that money flowed to farmers and to the organizations that support them.
With that, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. I'm so sorry, because I feel we're just getting started on the discussion. But Dan, can you give us a few closing words here?
And if I could just interject briefly, we do have in the chat links to the Adirondack Research Consortium's webpage, the YouTube channel where the recording will be up shortly, and that'll include like the questions and links to the sites, and the Facebook site where you'll be able to see questions.
Thank you. Anita made a neat comment here. Consumers act like direct marketing is entertainment. So be sure to add the value for this aspect. And I think that's right. We forget that.
Thank you, Eileen. And I want to thank all of you for a wonderful presentation on the history and evolution of agriculture in the Adirondacks. A fascinating presentation. And what a high note to end our fall webinar series. I want to thank Eileen Allen for organizing and moderating this webinar session. I want to thank our panelists, Anita Deming, Adam Dewbury, and Courtney Grimes-Sutton. Thank you for excellent presentations. I want to thank Paul Smith College for partnering with us and hosting these webinars. I want to thank Dr. Melanie Johnson, President of the Adirondack Research Consortium, and Professor at Paul Smith College for providing the technical expertise that make these webinars possible. I want to thank Adirondack Health for sponsoring this webinar, and I thank all of you for joining us today, and I wish you all a good day.
Thank you, Dan.
My screen just went black. Can you end the webinar?